Gottlieb is a psychotherapist who is the author of an incredibly successful New York Times best-selling book, Maybe You Should Talk to Someone. She did her undergraduate degree at Stanford and also attended to Yale, so she definitely knows a lot about her subject. And today we're going to talk about 5 tips to feel better and to be kind of psychologically more healthy. So the first tip would be that we want to make sure that we change our narrative. So basically she sees her job as a psychotherapist kind of like trying to edit other people's stories. Now what she means by that is when a patient tells her how they feel and how they see the situation that they're in, she will have a look at that and suggest how they could maybe see that story that they're telling her from a different perspective. Because if you've been in a relationship, you will probably notice that 2 different people can see the same exact situation in an entirely different way. Both can be valid, but you can see the same kind of situation from different angles. That's why she always tries to encourage her patients to think about the story they're telling themselves in a way that is going to help them in their life, and to maybe attach positive meaning to difficult situations in their life if possible. Daniel Gilbert, and he's a Harvard psychologist, in his book In Stumbling Upon Happiness, he talks a great deal about how actually feeling that we're in control, having a sense of meaning in our life when it comes to the suffering in our life, actually makes us suffer much less. If you want to feel better about the difficult situations in your life, you want to make sure that you attach some kind of meaning to them. Now, of course, you don't want to, if you've gone through a very, very traumatic experience, if you've, for example, been raped, or what do I know, or if you've seen someone be murdered, you definitely don't want to say that that was kind of a good thing. That would be really weird. I'm talking about experiences that are difficult, but not necessarily traumatic, as in like really, really traumatic. There you should actually maybe see the situation for what it is, but not ruminate on how bad it is. But when it comes to minor traumatic experiences, these actually often help us build more resilience when we're pushed out of our comfort zone a bit. And that actually makes us more able to deal with negative situations in future. Now, of course, if you've gone through a really traumatic event, unfortunately the opposite happens. You're sensitized to how bad the situation is, and then anything that reminds you of that really traumatic experience, that's going to feel much, much worse to you than it would for other people. And then the second tip would be that there's a difference between true compassion and idiot compassion. I find the term idiot compassion kind of funny, but on the other hand, what I don't like about that term, to be honest, is that people who give us idiot compassion actually mean well, and that's why I don't necessarily want to say that they're idiots if they give us that kind of compassion. She calls it idiot compassion because, so idiot compassion would be what probably many of your friends do. If, for example, you're going through a fight with your partner, they would kind of say things like, "Gosh, I can't believe he did that. How could he be so wrong? You're right. He's so stupid. He's an a-hole. Don't listen to him," all that kind of stuff. Your friends mean well when they give you this kind of compassion. It actually makes things worse. However, when it comes to relationships, it takes 2 people to actually be in a fight, so there probably also are some tendencies of yours that maybe lead to that fight or him reacting in that way. I mean, not in all cases, but in some cases your friends probably also know you quite well, and therefore they might think in their heads, well, you know, there is this kind of tendency you have that can make people angry, that can annoy people, but they don't tell you because they mean really well, but they don't want to hurt your feelings, and therefore they don't tell you maybe what might be the truth. And that would basically be true compassion. Still showing compassion, still being compassionate, but maybe hinting here and there that, okay, maybe that actually caused that fight, for example. Because what true compassion does is that it's actually way more helpful, because you're telling the person what they are in control of, what they can change to make their situation better in the future. Whereas what most people do with very, very good intentions, so I don't necessarily like the idiot compassion term in that way. The effect is that you go through life doing the same mistake over and over again and never being aware of it, and therefore never being able to change your behaviour because you're not even aware of the fact that you have this tendency. So basically, also when it comes to parenting, a parent who means really well but maybe isn't a good parent, who kind of really loves their child but kind of spoils them and tells them that, oh, they're perfect and everything's really wonderful with them, and maybe doesn't necessarily tell them off when they behave in a bad way, that is going to be actually worse for the child, because when that child then faces reality and then notices that society doesn't react to it in a way that it would like it to, the child maybe doesn't necessarily know that that isn't necessarily a good thing to do, or that doesn't really kind of fit social norms, and therefore it could maybe lead to the child being excluded by its friends because the parent doesn't kind of point out that that behaviour of them isn't very acceptable when it comes to society. The best way to go about a difficult situation in your life is also pointing out where you do have control over the situation, so you can actually learn from your mistakes, instead of being told that those mistakes of yours don't exist in the first place. And then the third tip would be that what Laurie Gottlieb doesn't agree with is basically dividing emotions in positive and negative emotions, because negative emotions are there for a reason. They're not useless, otherwise they wouldn't be there in the first place. So negative emotions can be a positive thing, especially because they're warning signals and they're information that you shouldn't ignore. For example, if you've eaten too many sweeties, a wonderful example, and you feel sick, it's good that you feel sick after you've had too many sweeties, because that shows you that you should be having less sweeties in future, because it isn't good for you. Whereas if you have sweeties and tell yourself, oh no, it's not because of the sweeties that I'm feeling this way, then you're going to be into big trouble and you're probably going to die earlier. But also when it comes to, for example, if you're in a toxic relationship especially, you definitely don't want to say that what your partner did is okay if they did something that's really, really cruel. And you shouldn't be all positive about what your partner did. If your partner does something really bad, you want to actually see that information for what it is. Feel those negative emotions that tell you that you need to leave that relationship if, for example, you are physically abusing that relationship. An example that she gave was, for example, when it comes to, let's say, envy, or when you compare yourself to other people. Yes, it feels really bad, but negative emotions actually show you what's important to you. If you didn't care about anything, then you wouldn't have any suffering in your life, because we feel the most pain when we feel like something that is important to us has been taken away from us. If you try to ignore all negative emotions, then you're basically living a life in which nothing is important to you, which, by the way, when it comes to Buddhism, it's all about detachment. That is that kind of thing. It can be very beneficial in some ways to detach from certain things. However, totally detaching yourself from everyone you love and not feeling any love towards anyone in your life is a life in which nothing is important to you, really worth living. And if we want a life in which we have things that are important to us, the consequence is that we're going to feel pain and suffering every now and then. It's part of the human experience. And then the fourth thing would be that, especially, I think men have a really, really hard time in our society, because on the one hand, they're supposed to be manly and stoic and not show any emotion. And then on the other hand, especially in relationships, women often complain about their husbands or partners not opening up to them, and that they feel like they're not very important to them because they're not willing to open up, or that somehow their partners don't trust them. Unfortunately, even though many women say that, and of course we're not talking about all women, just to make it clear, I think when it comes to, what men tend to do and what women tend to do, it's not what all women or all men are like, it's not what all men and all women tend to do, but it's like what men on average tend to do, or women on average tend to do or feel. So just to keep that in mind, I'm not talking about all women or all men. Many women will then tell their men to open up to them, and then once their man actually opens up to them, they feel like kind of unsafe, because men kind of have this role of being the kind of protector and provider, and in a dangerous situation, if the men would kind of behave like females do, and think about their emotions and all that, that would be a problem for women, because then no one would be there to protect them if men behaved in dangerous situations as women wouldn't try to protect anyone or defend themselves. For example, Gottlieb was in this situation where her clients basically were a couple that had the problem that I've already mentioned, basically that the woman feels like she'd like her partner to open up to her more. And then for the first time, the partner then in therapy became vulnerable, so much so that he started crying. And then all of a sudden you could see it on her face that she didn't know how to handle the situation, how she should react in this situation, and that she actually did feel uncomfortable because her partner was being vulnerable. I think in order to make it a little easier for men to live nowadays, we should kind of decide whether we want someone to be vulnerable or whether we want them to be stoic, because there's no point kind of as a society telling men that they're supposed to be vulnerable and not show any emotion at the same time. It just doesn't make any sense. Now, if you want to know more tips on how to, for example, change your narrative, you can watch this video here.